Good afternoon. The Shulchan Aruch rules that one should be botzeya on 2 kikaros of challah, on 2 loaves of bread of challah on Shabbos. The Ramah adds in that they should be shlemos, they should be whole loaves. To which Mishnah Berurah comments on and says that if one cannot have 2 whole loaves, then it is sufficient b'diavad to even use 2 partial loaves or even 2 pieces of bread, as long as they are a minimum of a kezayis. In general, when making bracha on bread, the ideal is to use a whole loaf whenever possible, to use either a whole loaf or a roll or something that is complete. It is more chashuv, it is more appropriate for the bracha to be made upon something complete. However, the Netziv explains that that's a separate obligation from Lechem Mishnah. So on Shabbos, like any time, we try to make it on shlemos, on whole loaves. But if one cannot fulfill that practice, then one still has their obligation of having Lechem Mishnah, and therefore one should go ahead and use 2 of whatever they're using whenever possible. What about using a frozen challah? So the obvious ideal circumstance is that one has 2 loaves that are ready to eat. But if not, many poskim rule that a frozen challah is in fact sufficient, including the Shmir Shabbos, Kehilchasa, Rav Moshe Feinstein, and others. The rationale is that since it will be edible at some point soon, it is clear that you have 2 loaves of bread which are edible. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, though, does qualify that and says that that's only the case if it can be defrosted by the end of the meal. If it's going to take longer than that, then he would say one may not use it. Though, again, not all agree with that requirement. Some say even if it would be frozen by the end of the meal, since it has the ability to defrost, that suffices for the purposes of Lechem Mishnah. Another question of what we can use is pasaba b'kisnin. Now, we have a concept, and not for now, this is a lengthy discussion, what is called pasaba b'kisnin, but it is some form of bread, which is, if we are koveya sudan, if we establish a meal on, then we make hamotzi. Otherwise, we make a mizonos. For example, cakes or cookies or the like are considered to be what's called pasaba b'kisnin. So that has a strange in-between status in halacha of whether it's bread or it's not bread or it's quasi-bread. So the reality is that, strictly speaking, it is considered as bread, but for purposes of those foods, the brachos may be different, may not always require to wash and bench. But the poskim do seem to conclude that when it comes to Lechem Mishnah, if one doesn't have proper bread, then one can go ahead and use pasaba b'kisnin to count as the second challah. So either some form of cookie or cake, if one has nothing else, that could already suffice for pasaba, for Lechem Mishnah. 2 more points. Rav Ephraim Greenblatt and Rav Ephraim rules that what about a bagel? So bagel has a hole in the middle, so maybe we'll think that won't be considered whole. He says that that is in fact considered a whole loaf of bread, since that's the way it's made, but it's complete as long as the rest of it is. One final note is that it's important to recognize that when reciting the bracha, and this is true not only by Lechem Mishnah, but anytime we make a bracha of hamotzi on bread, is that one should really be able to hold the bread directly. Therefore, it is most appropriate not to have the challah, even though we're not using, wrapped in a bag or in foil or something, but it is best to be able to hold the both challahs directly onto the bread. Have a fantastic day.